Hello, this is Blair Stanislao with the Happy Lion Center. Welcome to our podcast, Mystical and Infamous, where we have playful and easy conversations about anything mystical, getting to the heart of all things strange and weird. Join us in a bit of magical tomfoolery, spreading the alchemy of love and light. And now, we invite you to enjoy the show. It's been my experience so far that stepping into self-realization is a process, and it's an ongoing process. What is because you're so experienced at doing all of this with so many people, what is your experience with not only people's expectations of what really connecting or bringing the spirit world into the physical experience is versus the way that it actually pans out in quote reality?
Well, given that we do create our experiences through our belief systems and our emotional makeup, and we do have a pre-designed soul path in the sense of what we, as far as learning lessons or as far as earth experiences, how shall we say, we pre-designed it before we came in. But of course, our soul design is always subject to change, obviously, something not set in stone. But, when people advertise and promote about instantaneous, and then you fill in the blank.
Yeah.
It really doesn't work that way in a sense of how they market that idea or concept. Think of it this way. And everything is an evolution. Everything is growing, expanding, learning, maybe unlearning, relearning. So if that's true, if you, for whatever reason, decide to go from step A to step M without including all the other steps in between, I don't think that's possible. And even if you did do that, it might be overwhelming to your physical body and your brain. Think of it energetically. So my experience has been, and not to say that it's everybody's experience, but life is a process. We learn every year about a whole lot of things, and we mature. So think of it this way. Can you teach a baby that's 6 months old algebra? Probably not possible.
Right.
Right? Because the brain's not developed to handle that information, for one thing. So think about it this way. If people are immature energetically and spiritually, but they try to have it all now, raise a kundalini and whatnot, maybe blow out their brain or have a stroke or something, not a good idea. So I guess the point is that if we consciously intend through our prayers every day to master the next step that's in our life, we can't go wrong. Because that's the only thing you can do anyway, is take the next step. I've had people in the past come and say, Kenji, I want it all. Meaning give me the enlightenment experience. Give me the full thing, right? And I would say, well, I don't know if you really want to do that because your brain might not be able to handle that information and would go into overload and you would probably implode or explode. But you could always take your next step. So that's my sense.
Yeah. Would you say that when we're meditating or whatever word you want to use for it, when we're in the zone, that we do get glimpses of what that is? And of course, it's in small chunks. And then you come back to whatever your actual physical reality is. So in a sense, that's kind of preparing you for what is to come. So it's energetically preparing you for that.
Yes. Exactly. That's common sense, right? You you have to spoon food a baby. You can't shove a whole meal down a baby's throat, right?
Yeah.
The baby has to learn how to chew and swallow and digest and everything. See if, and when people market and promote about instant manifestation, well, I like to use the analogy of someone that wants to become an athlete. Well, they have to start a regimen, right? They have to get on the right kind of diet. They have to do psychological preparation. They have to physically start a regimen that build up the muscles to train the muscles, to train the body mind in their sport that they want to, participate in. So same thing energetically. We have to build up our energetic muscles to be able to handle these higher states. Yes. So we get glimpses of what could be, but also, we have to create technically, we have to create the channels to be clear. Like your Kundalini channels have to be clear. Your chakra channels have to be clear. The, how shall we say, the nadis in your aura, your field have to be clear. Because if you try to bring in this intense vibration and you have distortions and blocks in your field, obviously, right? It's going to hurt. It's going to be painful. Things will come up in your body that will be very weird and strange, maybe medical conditions or psychiatric conditions, symptoms.
Yeah.
So it's always obviously good to prepare, no matter what you do in life. It's important to build the foundation, like Jesus says. Build your house on a strong foundation so when the storm comes, your house won't get washed away. So, how many people do you know that have become kind of airy-fairy because, like they tapped into the upper atmosphere, so to speak, but lack the grounding and the stability and the centeredness of the body and earth life?
That's a super interesting question because actually I just mentioned this yesterday. There are people in our line of work that they are very articulate and they're experienced at talking about this stuff, but yet you can also see, and I don't know if I'm correct in this, I would love to have your input on it, but you can also see that the ego and the mind are very much still in the way. And so what I typically sense from those people is that, and I'm sure I'm one of them, right? I'm not exempting myself from that, but I typically notice that either the mind or the ego or the belief systems cause, I like to call it congestions, where energy may come in, but then all of a sudden it gets, there's a sticky point where it doesn't flow through, because when it flows through, it feels more like, I don't know, kind of like when you walk out in the sun and it's like all of a sudden everything is warm and all of it, you can breathe and
Yeah.
it all makes sense because it does also go with the mind as well. But I would say that the majority of people
Well,
really,
here's the thing. Are these teachers, these prophets of the new age, so to speak, a little comedy team insertion there. So are they teaching from experience or are they teaching from book knowledge and video viewing and listening to other people from what other people have said in retreats and workshops? See, that's the difference. Are
yeah,
they teaching from still the mental body, or are they teaching from direct experience?
right. And the ones that come from direct experience, even if they have, as they do because they're here, right? They still have an ego, they still have the mind. There's this, it feels like this very healthy acknowledgement of and respect for that part of them. And because they have distanced themselves enough from that, the conversations don't get stuck on that part.
Does or doesn't?
Does not.
Yeah.
mean, it may go by that and we may experience that, but there's typically with those kind of people, it's usually there's an acknowledgement that, oh, well, that might be my ego talking or, something to that effect. And then you just kind of then you understand it's just this a human presentation of this energy.
Well, let me see here. I got to make an adjustment here. Here's the thing with, let me see. That okay, I think that's good. Um, are you in service to self or others? That's another question when you're teaching. And if you probably notice this, I didn't notice it up until the so-called lockdown, and then things started to rise in the collective, right? People's unconscious, plus their gifts. I mean, the whole thing, right? I didn't know really what narcissism was until I started watching videos and other things. And I go, wow, so that's what that is. And that's all about me. Hollywood types,
Mhm.
certain spiritual types, people that are famous, people that have money, people that have power.
Yeah.
Uh, Never understood it, but I can see it now, but I didn't know what it was before. But that's an interesting phenomena, right?
Is that you're saying that when COVID happened that you started to notice that more in the just the people you were interacting with?
Just in general,
Okay.
including the spiritual movement, people that are on TV, people that are in movies. Um, I think it's very interesting. But again, I think the question goes back to, are you serving yourself or are you in service for others? I've always known that I wanted to learn and teach healing work, for lack of a better term. This was back in when I was a teenager, actually. So this goes to 1960s. But I didn't know how it would come about. I didn't know the form. I just knew that I was fascinated with the esoteric teachings of Jesus, not what you read in the Bible. Because I knew that. I knew that what really is in the Bible is very distorted. So where are his teachings? Right. So then we have the scrolls and all that stuff, right? And the Essene teachings. They give a little more insight in that. And like how did Buddha attain what he attained? How did he do that? These were fascinating subjects to me as I was growing up. So that was kind of my search for the meaning of Jesus, well, what he represented, and like what Buddha represented. Because I always felt I could blend the East and the West traditions together somehow, synthesize the spiritual teachings of the East, like they came out of India and the Himalayas and northern China, uh, Taoism, and blend it with the esoteric Western thought. Not so much Christianity, but like Greek philosophy and like Plato's teachings and Socrates. Fascinating.
And did you find that calling partially because you came from the Western environment where that kind of approach was more acceptable, or do you feel like you were really driven to that because it's something that's of interest to you?
Well, I think it's part of my calling. It was part of my soul makeup.
Right.
So it's not something that I had to decide, oh, yeah, I want to study this. It was like over there as an urge, like an urge, like you can't deny it. It's like you can feel it in your body. Yeah, that kind of force, I guess. So I went into philosophy my first year in college and I loved it. I had this philosophy teacher that never gave A's. That was the rumor. He never gave A's. And his classes was always like five students, six students, which was true because I took four of his classes and we were like my five students in the whole class, right? Which could easily be 20 or more. And I got A's. So that showed me something about my interest, my innate interest in kind of like everything from like New Zealand, the Maoris and the Aborigines in Australia, all the way up through like the Eastern Indian maybe even pre-Buddhist thought to contemporary thought. Yeah, it's fascinating. But I knew I couldn't earn a living being a philosophy uh, teacher, let's say, or getting a degree in philosophy, like a PhD in philosophy. Well, what's that going to get you? What kind of a job can they get you? And so I gave that up, as far as a degree focus.
So you have enjoyed pulling in the different presentations. Would you say that it's really different presentations of the same kind of idea or ideas? Like, I feel like if you look at, and of course I don't think I'm nearly as experienced as you are in terms of looking at the history of different spiritual experiences, but um of the ones that I have been involved with, what I have noticed is there is, if you look beyond the words, you look beyond the human presenting the information, and you really look at what the information, the essence of what they're trying to say. So not cloaked in the ego, let's say, or in the mind, or in the construct of the society in which it was created. You see something very similar all throughout all of the civilizations who come up with these spiritual teachings. Um, I haven't studied the Tao in great depth, but what I've studied of the Tao, boom, I just loved it. I was like, oh, yeah, that is spot on. Talk about not wasting energy with words or any of that other stuff. You can just get straight to it.
Yeah, I would say as an organized body of thought, Taoism comes the closest to the simplicity of what is and can be. Yeah. Plus, it's very beautiful in a poetic sense, in a visual sense of how art and sculpture manifest through that particular thought perspective. Yeah, it's very beautiful. I've always been attracted to Zen in the sense of it gets to the essence of stuff, yeah, and doesn't even include the clutter of Western contemporary mental body thought in a sense. So yeah, if we were talking about like what's the closest thing to the essence, that to me would be it. And yes and no to your question. Um, Here's the thing. Who teaches, and I think this is important because I think the lockdown brought this up regarding like what is true. What is true right now for everybody on this planet? And everybody's got an opinion about everything, right? And not a lot of people can agree. A lot of people can disagree, as you can see. And some people don't care.
Mhm.
Um, and some people really care. But what perspective teaches about how to discern the truth so that you know who you are in essence, which would mean then you know what you are and how you are serving and your purpose. Given given that the idea is that when one fully connects to the essence of self, then everything is given. Like that biblical saying, seek ye first the kingdom and all things shall be given unto thee. I always resonated with that as a young kid. Not too many stuff from the church, but that was one of them. And the golden rule, of course. I thought, yeah, everybody should do that. Then we wouldn't have any wars.
So what you're saying is, well, actually, I'm doing a master class on this week. Um, I call that the true self,
Mm,
connecting to the essence of that, which is the oneness, right?
yeah.
Um, so would you say that most spiritual paths essentially are aiming to reach that true self?
Well, yeah, each religious or spiritual path has an attempt. Yeah. Like yoga. What is the difference of yoga? It's union with all that is, right? You can't get any more complicated than that. I mean, that's pretty simple, right? That's the goal of yoga is union with God or union with creation. But how many yoga teachers really teach that from an experiential point of view? I don't hear of that. I've not heard of that. Sure, anybody can teach. Okay, do this pose, breathe. Now bring your focus here, let go of this and all that. But
Super. Okay, that's really interesting to me because I totally agree with you. So my answer to that first question was, um, first off, I'm not involved with a lot of yoga people, but what I have understood is that if they come to that understanding, it's almost by accident in
mm,
a way, like it's unplanned.
mm,
But then as you describe that, it's more like, okay, well, right, you're training all these yoga teachers to spread all this stuff. Well, they need something physical to do, right? But to teach the essence of how do you connect to that oneness,
mm,
right?
mhm.
In that avenue, it's physical movement or breathing techniques or whatever all the rest yoga is, right? Which is involved in every
Well,
practice.
I think it goes deeper than that. I think it is where you put your attention.
Oh yeah,
So
right.
yeah, beyond, okay, I'm going to do the sunrise pose now, or I'm going to go into a full lotus position here. It's beyond that. And it's even beyond the breath. All of that are like little
Pieces.
tools to like prepare the state.
Yeah.
I've noticed this with practitioners of any kind of healing modality. Their focus primarily is still on the technique
Hmm.
and not on the essence
Hmm.
of what the technique can support and produce in a sense.
Hmm. And I think that personally, I think that's the difference between programs like yours and the intention with the program like mine is that it's not the program itself. Yes, it has a container. Yes, maybe we agree to meet at a certain time. We're doing something specific. Maybe it's physical, maybe it's not. But, and though, like you said, those are tools, but they're tools to get to this place. I'm using the word recognition or reconnect, or, that's not even the right word. It's like almost alignment or something that's a way to almost open your eyes, your not your physical eyes, but open your awareness to recognize the connection. And that's the thing that we're all searching for. And you can't say that there's only one path, and you can't say that this is the right path and that's not the right path. And so then it becomes very confusing, I think, for a lot of us who are of the 3D.
That's why I like the Taoist idea, right? There's no path. There's no path. Carry wood and chop water. Okay.
Right, just live. Right. Yeah, yeah.
And after your enlightenment experience, continue to do the same, right?
Yeah. So in that vein, okay, so we're all, whether it's kind of ironic to me that you know somebody listening to this might be on the path to try and get to this attainment of oneness and awakening or what have you. They still have to carry wood, chop water, just like everybody does. And what I am most curious about right now is what in your experience has been for people who are going along that path. They carry wood, chop water. How is the carry wood, chop water part different for somebody who's going along that path versus somebody who isn't really awake, I guess?
Okay. One path contains a lot of joy and peace and harmony, and the other path contains a lot of stress and worry.
Yeah. So they're happier in general.
Well, yeah. Well, from your experience, from the work, when you're in the quantum, the zone, well, there's no thoughts, there's no pain, there's no fear, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And as we say, that's your natural state, spiritually speaking. And then what about the idea of embodying that frequency or vibration or consciousness in your body, which has never been done before, in a collective way?
Hmm.
And that's the challenge because, as you know, people that don't have a lot of physical support in doing their spiritual trip is it becomes very difficult in a sense. You feel alone,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, you wish you had more tribe around you and stuff. But maybe that's the challenge. Maybe it is standing alone in a sense in this field in the midst of the storm.
Well, I would argue to say that much like people are call it the dark night of the soul, I think the people who are oftentimes driven along this path are essentially they wind up finding themselves in that predicament that you're describing. They feel alone, they don't have support, it becomes very difficult. But yet there's some sort of drive, like you're talking about your pull, to continue on this path. And it's almost, I mean, it's very similar to this idea of digging your heels in, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and just saying, like for me, I just knew this quote reality that the world was presenting to me just simply could not be right.
Yeah, there's something wrong with this picture. Wait a minute, I'm gonna change the channel here.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to do. But for me, it wasn't even just that. It was also physical. It was not only physical in my body, but it was also physically around me.
Yeah,
And basically that other path that you're talking about, which is filled with stress and discomfort and all of that stuff, I was just so fed up with that. I just, like the almost the body or the mental mind or the emotional body or whatever, all of that just gets tired and says, you know what? I don't need that anymore. It doesn't matter my circumstances. I'm going to find a way out.
yeah.
And I feel like that oftentimes, which I think that's why we have these circumstances. And I've been told before that, people who become healers or what have you, oftentimes have these traumatic lives so that they are forced to go there. Um,
That's again the old Piscean perspective. So we're in the Aquarian astrological field now, right? We've moved out of the Piscean field of learning through pain and suffering, learning through friction. The Aquarian vibration is very different than that. So, yes, we can still have traumatic events that wake us up. We could have continual dark night of the soul, midlife crisis, existential crisis, Saturn returns, near-death experiences. We could have all of that. Or we can learn through joy.
yeah. And I definitely feel even with children that I have, my children and the young people of today,
Yeah.
they can see the pain of the past and they're like, no, thanks.
Yeah. No
I'm not
thanks.
doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a very different learning experience, right? Learning through joy. Still have the challenges. Not like you're not going to have any challenges, but would you rather go through it with struggle and
Yeah.
a lot of worry, or go through it with a lot of harmony and balance, peace and calm, and steady focus?
Mhm. Well, it's interesting you say that because I observed. So I was a teacher for a while.
School
And
teacher?
yeah, a school teacher. And
Mhm.
my mother was a school teacher too. So I saw them like as a child, as best a child could. Even having a parent that way, you see the shifts in the generations, like the classes that go through.
Yeah.
And so then as I become a teacher, I see the same thing as I'm just teaching. I think I taught for a little over 9 years, but um and then noticing my own children as they come into the stage where we can kind of really notice what they're really evolving into is and honestly, I think older generations, which probably has to do with the Piscean perspective that you're talking about, the older generations tend to be frustrated at the younger ones who are like, yeah, no, thank you. I mean,
Mhm.
it even goes down to having a conversation with somebody about my daughter's outfit for something that was like an interview. And this person was telling her, what is the kind of outfit you should be wearing? What kind of clothing should you be wearing? And I don't completely disagree with this person, but I also know my daughter enough, and I also know myself enough to know I'm not going to have that discussion with her because she's not
Mhm.
going to do that. She doesn't want to do that. It's uncomfortable.
Yes.
Why would I push her to do it? Because guess what? I hated it too. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And why not
Exactly.
have a better experience? I
You
feel like.
still see even in the spiritual community, because it's like a collective consciousness mindset. You're supposed to wear certain clothes and colors when you go on TV. When you play sports, you're supposed to act a certain way, scream a certain way, yell a certain way, behave a certain way, because that's what's expected, because that's what everybody else does. So across the board, I still see people entangled in old collective thought forms that, how shall we say, are still influential. And you look at social media and the influences there, right? So if we're getting to talk about sovereignty and really how to be free, not only in this world, but in the other worlds, we can't be influenced by influencers of any kind, be it spiritual, social media, political, um, media, media especially. Anything that disseminates information to the public, basically. So what I'm seeing is a lack of creative freedom. You gotta wear black, and women, you've got to wear man suit, and you got to be all black so that you're cool and you're powerful and you know what you're doing, as opposed to other colors that are, to me, are more colorful and creative. But let's just say that. So blacks become very, oh, you got to buy a black car for sure, man. So you're really cool, because that represents power and money. Okay.
Yeah, which is like this, it's just total garbage to me. It's just like, I don't know. I totally understand where you're coming from. So I'm curious. Again, I want to go back to this for the people who are on the path to be seeking this let's just call it awakening, or I don't know what, I don't even know.
That's a good term. Yeah. Yeah.
So awaken. They're on the path to this thing. At least in my practice, and I've been in your group for a while, so I feel like we're on the same page with this, but it's not like a destination, and it sure is not like somebody else is actually gonna give you the magic pill or
Oh,
button.
what? No magic pill? Really? Oh,
Like that's the thing.
I was looking for the carrot, the
Yeah.
magic carrot. No,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, something like that, right? Like there's some sort of magic thing that all of a sudden this happens really fast, and of course then you're completely adjusted, which we've addressed that. It doesn't really happen like that. But I feel like there's a disconnect between this, and maybe they're getting the vision, maybe they're getting premonitions of what it is to be awakened. But then I feel like maybe we tend, as a humanness, we tend to skip over the um the value of the process,
Hmm.
because the end result is not as wonderful if you don't experience the process itself.
Um, this might be a relevant example. People that take plant medicine and they have an experience. Everybody I've talked to has had a profound plant experience if they did that path. There's been anyone I talked to go in and it was okay. Didn't experience much. They all had an experience that changed their lives. But here's a question. And some argue that is synthetic experience, so it's not really real. It's like artificial, versus if you, through your own efforts, in a sense, produce that experience on your own ascent. But we're not talking about that. But so the question would be, all right, so they have this cosmic experience, or this experience with the spirit of the plant or the universe. Are they being taught or supported, or even, how should I say, well, are they integrating that experience in their daily life here on the earth plane?
Yes.
Are they making it real for the body to to, how shall I say, vibrate at a higher frequency, because that's what we're moving into, right? Higher frequencies. So that would be the question.
Yeah, that's a conversation that occurs, or it hasn't occurred in a while, but it has occurred in our group where um it's exactly that. Okay, that's nice that you had that experience. Yes, you now you have a glimpse of it. But what are you doing with that? And that's really, I don't know. I know that it's my focus, but I don't know that it's everybody's focus. But it really, to me, that seems so utterly important. It's not just attaining or being aware of this enlightened state. It's more like, okay, so how does that change the way you experience the world?
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
So what do you say for people who are ready? Let's say they've experienced that, they've touched it, they're
Mhm.
they're there all the time, but they feel it.
Mhm.
What is your experience with bringing that into the world as somebody is learning to do that? Like, what are the most important things for somebody to understand about the process of bringing that awakening, that awakened experience into their everyday life?
Well, first, that has to be an intention of theirs, right? To do that, then to be open to embodying that, which means then self-work, right? So what are my blocks? What are my resistance to being an embodied Christ's presence on the earth? I'm not talking about religion, but Christed awareness, meaning that field of unconditional love and oneness and joy and peace and all that, right? So it doesn't have a connection with religion at all, or even a spiritual path for that matter. So what are my resistance, my doubts, uh, any traumas that are related to blockages in my field that would prevent that? So we have to look at like, okay, where are my doubts? Where are my fears? Basically. So doubts and fears are like a brother and sister act. They are that like the essence. When you get to those two and you become aware of all of that that is in your field, then you're good to go. So think about this. If you didn't have any doubt about anything and you were fearless, what is there left? Right? There's no resistance left. You'd be free energetically. You'd be a clear channel. If you were fearless, that means no anxiety because anxiety comes from fear and worry. And you had no doubts about yourself, who you are, and what you're doing. Good to go, in my opinion.
So then you're saying that living from that space is really more of the physical manifestation or the physical presentation of bringing the spiritually aware experience into your life.
Okay, let's put it this way. So if there is no fear and doubt in the mind, and then that allows your spirit, your cosmic soul to be naturally aligned with your emotional makeup, which is part of your passion and your inspiration, then there's a free flow of creation.
Right.
That's how I see it. So, in other words, if we choose to become self aware, which means awake or enlightened, in light, men, I'm using play on words, in so if you go in, I-N, light, L-H-T, min, M-E-N, instead of the usual enlightenment, you see, you kind of got a thing of, oh, men, which also means women,
Yeah.
the light is in.
Yeah. Okay.
I sometimes play with words
Yeah. Well, good.
that sound the same, maybe not
Yeah.
spelled the same, but yeah. But anyway, so getting back, I think what Yeshua tried to exemplify in the so-called 40 days and nights in the desert, in the wilderness, where he confronted all of his fears, doubts, and uncertainties. He did. He wasn't perfect. He mirrored the human condition in the sense of the human makeup, but he taught himself and he was given guidance on how to clear his field every day so he didn't take his stuff into the dream time at night when he was sleeping, so to speak. But anyway, so those 40 days and nights in the desert was really about him finishing up with any lingering self-doubts about his mission. Now, what comes after that, historically, this is where we get a lot of argument. But let's just say, from the time of his desert experience and his unknown years, he went and traveled and studied with all the masters pretty much on the planet at that time, bilocated, or he walked really fast. He went to a lot of different countries and studied esoterically with the masters and was able to connect with his Akashic records, the collective Akashic records, his divine purpose in that lifetime, up to the point of him being betrayed by the so-called Judas character. I don't want to speak what happens after that because that's not my experience. And so therefore, probably a lot of people would argue with what I would say after that point, but we're not going to go past that, at least today. But his life was nothing but symbology for us to rock in a sense. Well, what really is the meaning of all that? The Sermon on the Mount, what really was that? The descent of the dove and the light, what was that all about? The resurrection part, all of that, the transfiguration, all of that. What was all that about? So if you look at allegory, you look at probably like Islam, the allegory of Islam and the Buddhist texts, it's really supposed to be allegories and symbols that would stimulate your idea of like, all right, how do you wake up? Well, wait a minute. How are we asleep in the first place? Tell me about that, right? How did I fall asleep so that I have to wake up? I don't even know that story. Well, so in the literature, way back in the literature, I forget what religion in a sense. I remember this from like 40 years ago. You know, certain things you remember because you need to remember these little tidbits for like later on. So it was said that a great spell came upon the earth. And I could literally see this energy coming upon the earth and putting people to sleep, like in this kind of hypnotic, negative hypnotic state, right? And people fell asleep. So we are choosing to wake up from that sleep because being asleep is too painful now, as you talked about. It's too painful. Life is too hard being asleep. Something's got to shift, right?
Yeah.
Somehow I've got to wake up, or I've got to like see things with new eyes or a new brain.
Yeah. And for me, I have great difficulty. For me, for some reason, it was very easy to shift into this. Okay, I'm ready to drop it because it was so painful. But
Yeah,
I see this in everyday life with everybody. It's just like, okay, my kids harass me all the time because they tell me something's happening. I'm like, well, are you enjoying that feeling you're having? Like, you really enjoying this experience?
I like that. Oh God, I like that. Write that down. Are you enjoying the feeling you're having? Oh, I love that. Tell whoever said that thumbs up. That was like a high five. That was like cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So they kind of mock it back to me, but then,
Yeah.
they go about their business, but they know that there's always this underlying, I can choose to experience something different if I want. Right.
Yeah.
I guess that's my frustration as even at this age in my life and this location that I exist in. It's like, even the political landscape or the economical landscape, if we don't like what we're seeing, why are we not working at either changing our perspective or changing the way we operate or, you know, make the change? You're the one here in the experience, you know?
Yes. Yes.
I have
If
one last question for you.
Yeah.
And it's in regard to that. Um, I am in complete agreement that we create our world around us. Everybody does. And we all experience technically different worlds because we all have a different perspective. What do you have to say to people who are not quite to that space where they can really swallow that information? I know that it can be hard because with that information also comes responsibility. It comes freedom and responsibility at the same time. So for somebody who's like right on the edge of starting to recognize that in fact they are the ones creating this, whether it be consciously, subconsciously, whatever, what do you say about how can they maybe make that shift to go off the ledge to fully embodying that?
I think the comedy team would like to respond to that.
Okay.
So maybe if that person was physically in front of me, we're just having a conversation and something came up, um, I might respond by saying, who's experiencing this? Who's experiencing this? Now that's an existential approach. That might get them to really like think, in a different way. Because it's not something you can just answer. It's not a cookie cutter answer question that you can answer like in 5 seconds. But who is experiencing this suffering?
That reminds me of Michael Singer's response to people who talk about how they can't meditate or this is I do this or I do that, and he's like, "How do you know?"
Yeah, yeah.
Well, so ultimately, the real question is, who am I? And that's connecting with the true self, and then bringing that into this 3D world in your 3D experience.
Well, it does appear from uh, hearing and reading about different so-called gurus in our history that they all essentially teach, yes, who am I? But I would say more of you're really more of a what than you are of a who. So what are you?
Mhm.
I like the what are you and how are you serving? How are you serving? Nobody asks that question. People don't ask it of themselves. Well, how am I serving today? What does that even mean? But here's my thing. I just try to live by the golden rule because as a little kid exposed to that, that was one of the other few teachings that I got from the church that I thought was really cool, like the golden rule. Well, yes, that makes a lot of common sense to me as a little kid. Everything else that they're teaching, I don't know, man. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
the golden rule.
right. Because ultimately, we are treating, however we treat whoever we treat, we are treating ourselves that way.
Well, we experience it, I guess, energetically is another way to put it. Yeah. How we see others, we experience that in our bodies, the reflection back, I guess. But I guess the thing is, like Buddha asked, is it possible to be free of suffering? So that's worry. So in contemporary terms, it's worry, anxiety. Mothers are taught to worry about their babies and their kids, even when the kids and the babies grow up to be 35, moms still worry because that's noble and that's what grandma said and that's what auntie said and right? So you know that worry just creates more worry. It doesn't create loving support. It actually can make people feel not very comfortable. So think about this. If you knew somebody was heavily worried about you because your life's not right now, it's all kind of messed up, how do you feel energetically, emotionally, receiving those vibes from that person? You wouldn't be happy and uplifted, I don't think. You
No,
would kind of go into more of a depression,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, my natural state is to all of a sudden feel responsibility, and that's a hard lesson that I've learned is that energy is not their energy is not my responsibility at all.
Oh, so today on the show live, why don't you just quit? Why don't you just quit?
Yeah,
I quit.
Well, that's the most freeing thing. I mean, I'm sure I'm still learning that lesson, but it has been a big one for me.
Oh, yeah, for all women. Yeah. You're not responsible for your kid's happiness. You as a parent, it's like this Rudolf Steiner symbology, I think. I think it came from his teachings. Came from somewhere. So I read this book about symbolically the role of parents with kids. And so the kids are like this little seedling you're planting in the garden. And so in seedlings, when rain comes and wind blows, it could literally destroy the seedling, right? So you've got to stake it up and maybe put a little wire fence around it so the deer don't come to eat it up, like that. So that's the parent's role, is to be like the fencing around the seedling and the stake so that the child can have a grow up with a straight spine in a sense, right? That's all parents are required to do,
Yeah.
right? Is that little guidance and support, nothing else. So how they end up is not your responsibility, not your problem,
Yeah.
right? And if your kid grows up to be a genius, well, it doesn't necessarily reflect upon you as a person in a sense because they have their own life. But you know, this society has this interesting thing about how like sons want to be like their dads and daughters want like to be like their mom and even physically kind of look alike and stuff and copy the same kind of characteristics and traits and stuff. That just means, I think, from my perspective, that um, they're not at the level yet of developing their own unique characteristics, shall we say, their unique
Yeah.
human signature in a sense. So they got to copy dad, or they got to copy mom, or they got to lean on dad or lean on mom. And then the parents care, yes, want the kids to get A's and like become a doctor or a lawyer. And no, mom, I don't want to do that. I want to be a horse trainer. What?
Yeah. And then they wind up having to unlearn or recognize that that is not uh their soul's path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, so we're learning about sovereignty, about breaking away from tradition. Tradition had its place in the current age. It doesn't have a place in now the Piscean age doesn't have a place in this Aquarian age. It is like this age is about really starting afresh with new ideas, new concepts, new ways of doing everything, which is going to be very challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we try to build this new world, this new earth from the past,
Yep.
it's not going to succeed.
No, those patterns don't work.
Yeah. As like your kids go, yeah. How are you liking that experience, Mom? I love that.
Yeah, they throw it back to me. Don't worry. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, it's been fun.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mystical and Infamous podcast with the Happy Lion Center. Send requests for topic discussions, questions, and comments to podcast@happylioncenter.com. That's podcast@happylioncenter.com.